Many people are puzzled about the distinctions between the terms Israelite, Jew, and Israel. While these words are often used interchangeably, each carries its own unique historical and spiritual meaning, shaped over thousands of years through various phases of biblical and historical events. In this exploration, we will trace the journey of these terms, beginning with the life of the patriarch Jacob, later known as Israel, and moving through the division of the ancient kingdoms, the exile, and the formation of modern Israel. Our aim is to untangle these concepts and illuminate how God's covenant with His chosen people, those connected by blood, faith, and a shared mission, remains central throughout. If you've ever wondered about the distinctions between Israelites and Jews, or been curious about the meaning of Israel, this journey through Scripture and history is for you. We'll begin with Abraham, the father of faith, and follow his descendants' paths, examining how these identities evolved and what they represent in today's world. To understand these identities, we start with Abraham. Called by God to leave his homeland of Ur, Abraham was promised descendants as numerous as the stars, a land for his people, and a unique covenant with God. This covenant passed to his son Isaac, and then to Isaac's son Jacob, who became the father of the 12 tribes of Israel. Jacob, after wrestling with an angel in Genesis 32, received a new name from God, Israel, meaning one who struggles with God. This event marked a significant transformation, with Jacob's descendants henceforth known as Israelites, the people of Israel. The term Israelite identified them as inheritors of God's covenant, binding them as a chosen nation dedicated to God's promises. Jacob, or Israel, fathered 12 sons, each of whom became the head of one of Israel's tribes. These 12 tribes formed the core of what it meant to be an Israelite. Each tribe carried its own lineage and land within the larger Israelite nation. Together they shared an identity rooted in God's promises, and as a collective, they became the people of Israel. At this stage, every member of the 12 tribes was considered an Israelite, a term encompassing all descendants of Jacob, or Israel. Yet Jew as an identity had not yet developed. All the people of the 12 tribes shared the same overarching Israelite identity. Around 930 BC, after King Solomon's reign, internal strife led to a division of the Israelite kingdom into two distinct realms. The northern kingdom, retaining the name Israel, and the southern kingdom, known as Judah. This split played a pivotal role in reshaping Israelite identity. The northern kingdom of Israel comprised 10 tribes with its capital in Samaria, while Judah, along with the tribe of Benjamin, formed the southern kingdom, centered in Jerusalem. This political and territorial division also introduced cultural and religious distinctions, with people in the southern kingdom beginning to identify primarily with Judah and its traditions. It is from this period that the term Jew, derived from Judah, emerged. Over time, Jew became associated with those from the southern kingdom who maintained a covenantal and cultural identity centered around the temple in Jerusalem and Torah observance. Meanwhile, Israelites in the northern kingdom continued under their own traditions until 722 BC, when they were conquered by the Assyrian Empire. The fall of the northern kingdom to Assyria in 722 BC marked the beginning of the exile and dispersion of the 10 tribes, who eventually lost their distinct identities as they were absorbed into the surrounding cultures. Known as the 10 Lost Tribes of Israel, they represent a theme of longing and restoration in Jewish tradition, with prophecies envisioning a future return. While these tribes were scattered, the southern kingdom of Judah survived a little longer. The people of Judah continued to worship in the Jerusalem temple and preserved their customs and adherence to the Mosaic law. Thus, Jewish identity became more defined, and while all Jews were Israelites, not all Israelites were Jews, an important distinction shaped by geography, culture, and religious practice. In 586 BC, the Babylonian Empire under King Nebuchadnezzar conquered Judah, destroying Jerusalem and the temple. This traumatic event sent many of Judah's inhabitants into exile in Babylon, where they had to adapt to life without a central temple or their homeland. In exile, their identity as Jews, people bound to God's covenant, strengthened. They developed practices centered around Torah study and established synagogues as new centers for worship and community, guided by rabbis rather than priests. This period of exile redefined Jewish identity. Without a physical homeland, the Jewish people preserved their faith through monotheism, observance of laws, and community worship. Jewish practices like observing the Sabbath, following dietary laws, and circumcision became central markers of identity, separating the Jews from other Israelites who had lost their distinct identity. After 70 years, when Cyrus the Great of Persia conquered Babylon, he permitted the Jewish exiles to return to Jerusalem. Some Jews returned to rebuild the temple, while others remained scattered throughout the ancient world. Those who stayed continued to establish Jewish communities, further solidifying the term Jew as one defined by religious commitment, even when far from the land of Israel. As Jews rebuilt the temple, Jewish identity became less about being from a specific tribe and more about adherence to the covenant and Torah, forming what would later be called rabbinic Judaism. The Jews now saw themselves as not only the descendants of Judah, but as a people devoted to the preservation of God's laws. The emphasis on Torah study and the role of rabbis became central after the exile. Rabbinic Judaism emphasized that being Jewish transcended tribal lineage. It was now an identity tied to the covenant with God and adherence to His commandments, preserved and transmitted through the guidance of rabbis. This unifying commitment made Jewish identity less dependent on tribal affiliations, cementing a communal identity deeply rooted in faith and practice. By the time of the Roman Empire, references to the Jews rather than the Israelites appear, as tribal distinctions faded. Yet, the spiritual and ancestral identity of Israel remained significant, representing the legacy of God's covenant with Abraham and his descendants. In 1948, following centuries of persecution and dispersion, the formation of the modern state of Israel reintroduced Israel as a national identity. While Jewish people worldwide view Israel as their ancestral homeland, the term Israeli now refers to citizens of the nation, who may be of various religious and ethnic backgrounds, including Jews, Arab Muslims, Christians, and Druze. Thus, modern Israeli identity is distinct from Jewish identity, encompassing a broader citizenship within the political state of Israel. Throughout the Bible, Israel is central to God's promises, forming the foundation as a covenantal people. Prophets like Isaiah, Jeremiah, and Ezekiel spoke of a future when God would restore Israel, uniting all people under His covenant. This vision of a unified Israel endures as part of the prophetic hope within Judaism, symbolizing restoration and unity among the descendants of Jacob. In Christian belief, Israel's role is also significant. Jesus, viewed as the fulfillment of messianic prophecy, extends God's covenant to all nations. The Apostle Paul in Romans 11 explains that Gentiles are grafted into Israel's olive tree, illustrating the concept of a shared spiritual inheritance. The calling of Israel remains central to the broader narrative of God's plan for humanity. To be Jewish today means to belong to a people whose identity is bound by ancient covenants, a shared cultural heritage, and for some, a connection to Israel. This identity is both spiritual and cultural, uniting people in faith, language, traditions, and history. Jewish communities worldwide preserve customs passed down through millennia, reminding them of their place in a legacy that stretches back to Abraham. For Israel as a nation, this heritage continues to be an anchor, representing both the ancient and modern identity of a people who have survived dispersion, exile, and rebirth. The Jewish people, whether religiously observant or culturally connected, carry forward the covenantal history of Israel, embodying a promise of faith, resilience, and commitment to God's purpose in the world. If this exploration has provided insight into the distinctions and connections between Israelites, Jews, and Israel, share it with others interested in biblical history. This journey through Israel's layered identities invites us to appreciate the enduring promises and the timeless relationship between God and His people, a story that binds us all across generations and nations.